8print.co. 8print.co. How to print magazines and direct mail them. 8print.co. Printing magazines or catalogs and bulk mailing costs. There are 7 huge steps to get you from printing your magazines or catalogs out to being able to distribute them door to door in the US, the UK, or Europe. For this particular video, we're going to concentrate on the US market because that's where most of our clients are. Here's the 7 steps. Let's first deal with major catastrophes and calamities. Everything that can go wrong in each of these 7 steps. That way you know why each one's super important. Number 1, printing. Printing cost can double, triple. For instance, the cost to print a magazine can be $6 to $7 an issue for, say, a 48-page magazine in America, $6 to $7. Now remember, each magazine only sells for $2 to $3, so where do you make the profit? Well, through advertising. So selling a magazine is only partially subsidizing the whole cost of printing the magazine. $5 to $6 to print in America. In Asia, you're looking at $1.50, $2, sometimes even $1 or less per magazine. It's 5 times more expensive to print in America, number 1, than Asia. So we're in the press room now. And this is our Heidelberg. Heidelberg Harris. Number 2 fact about printing. Well, isn't all Asia printing the same? What if I print in China versus Korea versus Japan? Japan is more expensive than America. Japanese labor, have you tried to take a taxi in Japan? You know how expensive it is? That's how expensive printing is, or anything labor-oriented in Japan. Don't even try to do anything in Japan. China is 5 to 6 times cheaper, well, 20% of the cost of printing in America. Korea is about 24, 25%. So that means that Korea is 20% more expensive than China? Yes. But what's the difference? Huge difference. Remember, we're still on number 1. Korea, while it's about 15, 20% more expensive than China, the quality is about 30% better. Well, what if I don't really care about the quality? What you're going to care about is customs. Korea and America have a Korean-American Free Trade Agreement. It's called the FTA, which makes importing from Korea into the US free. There's no duties, no taxes, nothing. So what you're paying is actually what you're paying. Now, you try and save 20% of your money by printing in China. Okay, it looks good on paper until you get to US Customs. Then US Customs will ding you for 20, 30, 40, 50%. You know how America doesn't really get along with China very well? So this one here is our Mitsubishi 8-color web offset press. And it happens to be right next to our Heidelberg 8-color web offset. And I'm going to take you to our 3rd 8-color press. And that is our Toshiba. It's right over here. Next, let's go with number 2, enveloping. If you don't do enveloping right, well, guess what? Your magazines or catalogs just won't go through USPS or British Mail. It'll just get stuck and get rejected. Let's go to number 3, packing. If you don't pack correctly, your shipping costs, whether you're going to ship from Korea to America or the UK via ocean freight or air freight, your shipping costs are going to go way up if your packing is done wrong. Another thing, let's say someone else is shipping gallons and gallons, drums of marinara sauce right next to yours, and because of the weather pressure, the air pressure, the heat, the marinara sauce explodes. Well, guess what? If you didn't do the packing right, it's going to get all over your boxes of magazines. You've got to wrap everything, palletize everything, and wrap everything with plastic. That's packing. Number 4, shipping. The difference between shipping could be, say, 10 days to ship from Asia to the port of Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, or Vancouver versus a month. That's a huge difference. It could take 3 times longer to ship and cost you twice as much if you don't do the shipping component right. Customs is a big deal. You could get stuck in customs for 180 days, or you could have your entire shipment of everything, well, sent back to Korea, wherever you're printing your magazines or catalogs. Not fun. Inland charge? Let's skip that. Mailing. Now, mailing, if you don't get the mailing component wrong, you could pay 10 times as much. I'll give you an example. There's media mail in US Postal Service, right? It only costs $2.50 or something. It's around $2 and something. We don't ever use media mail, and I'll tell you why now. You can't use it for anything commercial. For media mail, you can send the Bible, you can send a textbook, but the moment that media has any kind of advertisement, let's say it's a DVD. It's a DVD with commercial content on it. Sorry, it's not going to go through media mail. You're going to have to pay the US government all $12 for express priority mail. And that was number 7. We're going to tell you how to get this down to about 25 cents a piece per magazine or catalog, and even cheaper for postcards, obviously. All right, let's dive into number 1, printing. Since we already digested, should I print in Japan versus Korea versus China, let's go into what should I print on. Here are your 4 choices. You can pick from indigo printing, laser printing, offset printing, or web printing. Now, mind you, laser is not ever called laser. No one calls it laser because you know the quality of laser printing. It looks crappy. There's toner streaking, there's styration marks. So what they call laser is digital offset, or POD printing. When someone says POD printing, don't get confused. What they mean is laser, okay? So let's go through this real quick. Indigo is the highest quality. It's the most expensive per print. Laser is the lowest quality and the most inexpensive at low quantities. I'm talking about 100 copies to 500 copies max. If you go over 500 copies, neither of these become options. You only have these 2 options left, offset and web. Offset is the cheapest for anything under 10,000 copies, maybe 20,000 copies. Just standard offset printing is the best way to go. And this is how fast the paper goes through. But this is the black ink. So this is how the black ink ends up on the big sheets. And the sheets are this big. Web offset, if you go over 30,000 copies, 20,000 copies, now we're talking web. And here's the difference. Can you see that? Now what we're doing is, this is a price grid comparison. Let's say your magazine is 8.5 by 11, you've got 16 pages in it. How much is it going to cost to print it on an indigo versus a laser versus offset versus web offset? And here's a view of the entire printing press. See if I can give you a big picture view. And this press, by the way, is the one we use to print all of Germany's Audi brochures throughout all of Asia. So from start to finish, this is going to get you the CMYK, and then we move it to the dryer. Okay, that's close enough. What's happening here? Here's the cost. You notice how what's happening is, by the time you get to about 1,000 copies, this laser line here, laser, doesn't go any further to the right. It just, you can't do more than 1,000 copies. And it's the same thing with indigo. Indigo, it just doesn't go any further this way. Because what ends up happening is, you know how with your TV, you're not supposed to keep it on the same channel or keep it on the same freeze frame for more than 30 minutes or an hour because it'll burn the image into the actual diodes of your TV. So that's why if you notice CNN or if you notice any TV channel that has their logo right here on one side, the logo keeps moving. They try and move the logo around a little bit. That's so that they don't create any screen burn. And it's the same thing with laser and indigo. Nobody who owns a laser printer, which is what they would call a digital offset printer, wants to print more than 500 copies or 1,000 copies, because as they print more and more copies, they're going to start burning that image of your product into their drums, into their rollers, and it basically just destroys their machine. So here are the costs. Now you'll notice that laser costs anywhere from $6 to $8 to print a 16-page 8.5 by 11 magazine or catalog. Indigo costs $22 each, straight across the board. Laser, they'll give you a quantity discount. You start printing 300 copies instead of 100 copies, and the price per copy doesn't go up 3 times. 100 to 300 copies is 3 times more copies. It'll only double. And then from 100 to 500, it should go up 5 times, but it doesn't. It only goes up about double and a half. So it only goes up about 300. So what will end up happening, this is too small for you to see, but there's a slight arch. There's a slight arch that brings down the prices. Okay. Next, now you'll notice offset printing and web offset. What ends up happening here with offset printing, it starts at about $1,000. You cannot do an offset printing project efficiently for a 16-page brochure or catalog for less than $1,000. You might be able to get away with $500 or $800 at the time per magazine just to set up. And that'll buy you 1 copy if you have a good relationship with a printer. So for our clients, for instance, if we have a good relationship with them, they only want, say, 500 copies of their catalog or magazine or event guide book. Then what we'll do is we'll just charge them minimal setup. But if you don't have a good relationship, it's very hard to do. So you'll notice that the starting prices start way up here. Now this offset printing price starts at about $1,000. So this is $5,000, this is $10,000, and starts arching this way to allow your total cost to be anywhere from 30 cents per magazine or catalog, 30 cents, that's pretty good, or $1,000 each if you only print 1. It becomes 30 cents each if you're printing 30,000 of them. So you see that. Now, what's interesting here is this line. This line is much cheaper. This line will buy you the same catalog for 20 cents each. But if you only print 1, it'll cost you $4,000 to print 1. That's because the cost to print 1 is the setup cost. It costs $4,000 to set up a huge web offset printing machine. And it's the same one that you saw at the beginning of this video. The big Heidelberg Harris, the big, huge monster that looks like a football field. That's the one. That's why it takes $4,000 to set it up. But the cost is pretty even. All you're doing is paying for paper and ink after the original setup cost. So it's pretty cheap. A couple other technical things you should know about web offset versus standard offset printing. Web is about 10 to 12 times faster than standard offset. So 30,000 copies of your magazine on a web offset press, let's say it only takes, say, 3 hours to print here. If you're using a standard offset press, it'll take 30, 40, 50 hours. It'll literally take a week to do what you can do in 3 or 4 hours here. Also, second thing you need to know is that a web offset press has paper on huge rollers. I mean, you saw the rollers at the beginning of this video, right? They're just huge rolls of paper. It looks like massive, giant, oversized toilet paper, right? And it feels that way too. You cannot go over 120 grams. That's about 80-pound text. So 60 to 70-pound text is about the maximum. So if you're looking for a really heavy, thick, meaty, substantial catalog, sorry, you're not going to be able to use this pricing guide. You have to go with this steeper pricing guide for offset, because offset printing can go up to 350 grams, which is going to be about 180-pound cover, 200-pound cover. Much thicker. Now we're barely on to part 2. Part 2 is enveloping. In the US, you could be looking at 60 cents to stuff an envelope. And what's happening, this goes lower if your United States-based direct mail company uses illegal immigrant labor. I mean, I'm just going to tell you the truth, okay? This is not a political broadcast. Now think about that, 60 cents and you've got 1,000 envelopes to stuff. That's $600 to stuff 1,000 envelopes. $600 for 1,000 envelopes. The cost to print the magazines that go inside the envelopes might only be $2. So more than a quarter, almost a third of the cost of mailing is the stuffing. Now, KR stands for Korea. Korea, well, the US is 6 times more expensive than Korea. 6 times. Why is that? It's because the US minimum wage is huge now. What is it, like $90 an hour? Well, by the time you watch this video, it'll be $90 an hour. It's that high. And stuffing envelopes is all manual labor. It's done by hand. Now, some direct mail companies use illegal immigrant labor. And if you use illegal immigrant labor, they can get this price down from about 60 cents each to about 20 cents, 30 cents. It's still 3 times more expensive than Korea. Now, here's the big caveat. Sure, short term, if you're only going to use an American company to do direct mail for you really fast, once, that's fine. But I'm guaranteeing you, especially with a guy like Trump, if he's president, these companies are going to go out of business instantly without any notice, and you're stuck in a lurch. You have to find someone new. So you can skip that entire political melodrama and go straight to Korea at a stable 10 cents, sometimes cheaper, sometimes down to 5 cents per stuffing of an envelope. So now that we got that figured out, let's go with packing. Okay, let's deal with packing. Now, for packing, what you're going to need to know is make your boxes 22 pounds or 50 pounds, mostly 50 pounds, and wrap everything in plastic, put everything on a pallet. Now, plastic and palletizing is going to add weight, so it'll raise your cost of shipping by about 10%, 5 to 10%. It's minuscule, but you're protecting your stuff from the next guy's marinara sauce. 22 pounds, all you need are a couple boxes that are 22 pounds, mixed in with all the rest of them being 50 pounds. Your pallet is going to be about 400 pounds, so you only want about 8 boxes stacked on one pallet, 8 to 12 at the most. Why are most 50 pounds and why are some 22 pounds? 50 pounds is what you can conveniently, easily carry, just yourself, one person. You can carry that within your destination, within your office, or we can carry that in our printing facilities, or we can carry it easily within our DM facilities or direct mail facilities in Los Angeles, Vancouver, and San Diego. So that's why 50 pounds. Why 22 pounds? This is not necessary, it's optional, but it's a good idea because if you put a box in this pallet that's 22 pounds, and suddenly you decide, oh my goodness, I need 100 copies of this magazine right now, instantly, for a meeting tomorrow. Well, you can just take this box, put it in a backpack, and it's carry-on weight. Most airlines have a 22-pound carry-on, 23-pound carry-on limit. So you can just put it on a backpack, pay a round trip from Korea to New York or LA for $1,200 round trip. It's pretty affordable. It's actually cheaper sometimes to do that than to use FedEx. If you were to send this same box via FedEx, since we're kind of infringing on this shipping topic, but 50 pounds through FedEx, $700. $700 for 5-day or 4-day service to just ship a box that's 50 pounds. If you were to take the same 50 pounds and ship it standard mail, you're looking at 2 to 3 weeks, and it'll only cost about $100. So $500, $100, $500. It all hinges on this 50-pound box. Next, let's deal with shipping. Let's get down to specifics. Shipping by air takes about 5 days. Shipping by sea takes about 20 days, sometimes a month, depending on weather. You hit the ocean freighter right before it sets off. But if you hit the ocean freighter when it's empty, guess what? They're going to wait days and days and days until they fill this entire thing up. It's like morning carpool to work. All 4 of you are going to get to work late. Now here's the break-even point. 500 pounds. Sometimes up to 800, really depending on the year, how busy it is, whether it's peak season for airfare or peak season for ocean liners. 500 pounds, whether by sea or by air, is still going to cost you right around $1,500. Technically, there's about a 20% difference here and there. 20% is not that much, so I'm generalizing here. 500 pounds, sometimes up to 800 pounds, will still cost you $1,500. Now, 50 pounds, as I mentioned before, by air is exactly $500. It's really expensive. 10 times heavier, but only 3 times more expensive. What about on the high end of everything? If 500 pounds costs $1,500, what if I ship a car? What if I ship a Hummer or a huge SUV and it's filled with my magazines and catalogs? All you have to do is ship one container. One container costs about $3,000 if by sea. It's really cheap. Now remember that. 500 pounds costs $1,500. But 2,000 pounds, 10,000 pounds can only cost double. But that pricing only applies by sea. If you're going by air, doubling the weight will literally double the cost. Everything's very linear. There's no curve on air freight. Now, you ready to go through customs? This is a little more complicated, so I'm going to show this to you up close and personal. There you have it. This is our factory. Okay, if you're ready to deal with customs, here it is. It's a lot more complicated. So I'm going to give you a close-up. This is our factory, and this is your door, or the door of your subscriber for a magazine or catalog. And all of these steps in between, from here to here, are mandatory. None of them are optional. So let me run through what this means. Xworks, if you check Xworks on your customs form, that basically means that, well, all we have to do is leave your goods, leave your magazines and catalogs at our factory. That's it, that's all we do. They're just sitting on the factory warehouse floor in Korea, and you have to come get them. FOB, if you check that form, if you've ever sent anything, FedEx or UPS, you've seen some of these classifications. FOB means free on board. This is the onboard vessel. So what this means is, what you want is not just to leave your magazines and catalogs in our factory in Korea, you want us to ship them onto the vessel, whether it's an airplane or a boat or a train. And that's all we do. We just put it on top of the vessel, and from there on, we don't know what happens to it. CIF means what you want us to do is cover your insurance. All these freights, packages, have to be insured. So you want us to handle your insurance, and you want us to get not only the packages on board the vessel, but you want us to get you all the way out to the US port. So what that means is we're paying for airfare, or we're paying for the price of shipping on the ocean liner. Next, if you check DDU on the customs form, and I know I keep referring to the customs form, you might be wondering, what customs form? I don't have a customs form. We'll send it to you. We'll send you the customs form. So when you get it, refer to this part of the video and you'll understand what each one of these options are. DDU means we're going to get your box through customs. We're going to get your shipment, all the way from the plastic wrapping to the pallets to everything that's in the box. We're going to make sure it's absolutely kosher and it goes through customs, no problem. That's DDU, and this is what we recommend the most. DDP means we take care of everything from here to here. And what DDP means is that we also pay your US duties. Wait a second. I thought there weren't any duties. Didn't you say that because of the Korean and American Free Trade Agreement, there's no tax coming from Korea to America? Yes, there's not. So when we pay our US duties, we don't have to pay anything. Does that sound right? I'll tell you why it's better to check DDP than DDU. Because DDP enables us to do everything from start to finish for you, what happens is you're not going to have the problems that occur at the DDU level. What problems can occur? This is a big one. Let's say the customs agent, the US customs agent that happens to be inspecting the ship container load or the air freight container load of stuff. If you've ever seen a US customs video, you know what I'm talking about. It's on YouTube. There's these entire lines, conveyor belts, and these guys spend about half a second looking at each huge pallet and kind of guesstimating whether the HS code on the pallet is correct. And the HS code is a universal standardized code for whether this is a printed material, whether it's educational, or is it commercial? Does it have ads in it? Is it a textbook? Is it a Bible? Is it religious? Or is it a book that also has, for instance, magazines? Some magazines have the perfume flap on it, the scratch and sniff kind of perfumey thing that Chanel No. 5 in Vogue magazine, you can smell it. If it has anything out of the ordinary, the customs agent has to go and look at it and say, the tax form says it's a magazine, but guess what? It actually has an odor-causing little perfume sampler in it. It's not just a magazine, it's an actual product sampler. So the HS code has to be different. Let's say your HS code is absolutely right on, and it's right. You had your lawyer confirm that this is the correct HS code, and we do that for you. We'll tell you what HS code to use, whether you use DDU or DDP. But the problem is this customs agent, if he's hungover that day, or if he's just in a bad mood, or if he just makes a mistake, he can hold your package and he can actually charge you duty on something that doesn't require any duties whatsoever. Hasn't that ever happened to you before, where you weren't speeding and you get pulled over for speeding and you just have to take it to court? Exact same thing. If deadline is important to you, go DDP, because what will happen is 1 out of 20 times, that's actually pretty high, 5%. 5% of the time, the customs agent, for no reason whatsoever, will hold your package and say, sorry, your package, your magazines and catalogs don't fit under the Free Trade Act. To get them released fast, what you have to do is just say, yes, okay, I'll discuss it later, I'll debate it later, and I'll take you to court later. Right now, I just need the boxes, so here's my 20%, 30% tariffs. And you just pay the US Customs Department. If you do DDU and you have to directly pay the US Customs Department, it could take weeks. If you check DDP and we pay the US Customs Department because we have an account with the US Customs Department, it goes through same day. That's the difference. In either case, since most magazines and books and catalogs aren't taxed, you get your money back anyway. So DDP is just a major insurance policy. Now, here's the part where we're talking about going to your door. DDP also covers inland freight charges, which leads us to part 6. Part 6. Inland freight charges and inland freight service. Just don't do this. I could talk for an hour on why you shouldn't do this. Just don't do it. Let me just give you 2 major points, and if you think you might have to, or for some reason you might apply in this category, we can discuss it personally. I don't want to waste everyone's time on the internet by talking about something that you just shouldn't do anyway. But here's the big brushstrokes. The reason why you don't want to deal with any inland freight charges is because we can ship directly to the Port of Los Angeles, and then at our direct mail facility in Los Angeles, we can just go to the LA post office and sort everything and drop everything off all nice and neat so that you're in the mail the very next day after you arrive in the Port of Los Angeles, or Vancouver, Canada, or San Diego, where we have direct mail locations. So it's direct. Why would you want to take pallets and pallets of stuff? Literally, it's about the height of an average man. And it's you can just think of, say, 2 to 3 refrigerators put together is how big these pallets are. Why would you want to take them from the Port of Los Angeles and then put them on a tractor trailer and then spend another 3 or 4 days shipping them to some other place in the United States, say, I don't know, Texas, because the cost of labor and taxes are lower in Texas. So you want to distribute them out of Texas? Well, the cost to put it on a tractor trailer and ship it to Texas is going to be more expensive than the cost to just handle everything in our Los Angeles warehouse. So, you ready to move to the last step? Mailing can cost 20 cents to $2 each just for postage. If we do sequencing, sorting of zip codes, labeling, and zoning correctly, you're going to hover right around the 20 cents to 40 cents per magazine each. So now, here's the rub. In order to keep your prices closer to the 20-cent postage mark per piece, we have to sequence, sort by zip code, label, and zone, all before we do the packing. Right after the enveloping, we do all this so that we can keep your prices for mailing down to this. What is all this stuff? The US Postal Service wants all these addresses sorted in order. Next, we have to sort by zip. So, if 94102 happens to have 10 magazines, and zip code 10012 in New York City happens to have 50 magazines, guess what? They all have to be bundled together and rubber banded together so that they go straight to the nearest post office in 10012 or 94105. Labeling. Sounds simple enough, right? No. The actual label, the address, has to be exactly in the right place. If it's, say, 1 inch or half an inch over or half an inch higher, they don't scan automatically. Remember, these packages, these envelopes lie in a conveyor belt, and there's an infrared scanner going zip, 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 zip. And so if your labeling is off position, again, you're looking at a $2 per piece to post, as opposed to a 20 cent per piece to post rate. Finally, zoning. Zoning's big. Let's say half of your magazines are going to New York City, and the rest of them are going just all 5% to Texas, 5% to California, 5% to Wyoming, whatever. The closest zone is going to be the New York City zone. So you're actually better off taking this entire package to New York City and dropping everything off in the New York City zone, because half of these pieces are going to go out at 20 cents each. The other half that go into different zones, they might go up to 30 cents or 40 cents each because they're just further away. So wait, does that mean that I should actually, let me go find this. Where is that? Here it is. Inland charges, does that mean that I should actually take this and pay for the inland charges to ship from the Port of Los Angeles to New York? Not really. Because most of the time, and you could be an exception, most of the time you're going to pay $800 for an 18-wheeler semi tractor trailer to take you from Los Angeles all the way to New York City just to save $400 in US Postal Service charges. To get a quote for all 7 of these steps, contact us. 8print.co. I'd be happy to personally talk to you and get you a quote for your catalogs, magazines, and for distributing throughout America, Canada, or Europe.